And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual presentation of Ninth House, the paperback edition. And we're so excited to have Leigh Bardugo and Holly Black here with us tonight. Before we begin, I do have some short guidelines. We do have signed book plates available for those who would like to purchase a copy online. To purchase a signed copy, please click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer screen, and it will take you to our website. And when you're completing your purchase, please scroll down to the bottom and write signed copy in the comment section. That way we know that you want a signed book plate. And I believe that we do have book plates available for Leigh Bardugo's other books as well. Just make sure that you put it in the comments for those titles. Also, this event includes a Q&A. You can submit your question by using the Ask a Question function at the very bottom of the screen. You can vote for any questions you'd like, and they will make their way to the top of the list. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers real quickly and let them take it from there. Leigh Bardugo is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of fantasy novels and the creator of the Grishaverse, which spans the Shadow and Bone trilogy, the Six of Crows duology, the Language of Thorns, and King of Scars. Her short stories can be found in multiple anthologies, including the Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy. Her other works include Wonder Woman, Warbringer, and Ninth House, which was the Goodreads Choice winner for Best Fantasy 2019. And joining her tonight is the lovely Holly Black, the #1 New York Times bestselling author of over 30 fantasy novels for kids and teens. She has been a finalist for an Eisner Award and the Lodestar Award, and is a recipient of a Nebula and a Newbery Honor. So I'm going to get my face off screen so you can see Leigh and Holly. Great.
Damn, make us all look lazy and sad.
I'm just old. I'm old. See, I'm old.
No, I love that I literally set fire to my scalp in an attempt to have silver hair, and you were just like, "Allow me to grow it. Allow me to be perfect."
I didn't know I was ever there. Yeah, tonight I am debuting my bangs.
I love the bangs. That's another thing I've never been able to pull off. So congratulations to you, Holly Black, with My Dream and the third novels.
I have many questions, but
okay.
There's this one that I have been asking last in all the interviews I've done, but I'm going to ask it to you first.
Okay.
It was a question that was asked, but it was an audience question when I was interviewing Cassie, and it was so good that I have latched onto it.
Nice.
What is the weirdest thing that you have bought in quarantine?
Okay, I have two answers for this. One, I bought a lot of meat. So we were literally, all right, people, here's some personal info for you. So my partner and I were literally driving on our way to get married when quarantine struck. And we sort of stopped and hung out in Utah for a while and tried to figure out what to do. And everybody was talking about meat shortages. So I ordered just an enormous amount of meat. And we didn't eat any of it. It's just in our freezer. So we're prepared for the apocalypse with many items of meat. And then the other thing was we bought a puzzle. We thought, oh, it would be fun to do like a jigsaw puzzle. And so I bought like Merlin's Workshop puzzle because I thought this I will enjoy this. There will be owls and creatures and stuff. Turns out I am terrible at puzzles. And it sat unfinished on it was very much like a metaphor for something because it sat unfinished on that table for about a month before we finally packed it up and just said, this is not our jam. Merlin's Workshop will never come to be. So yeah. What's the weirdest thing you bought?
So I bought a lot of stuff, like a lot of weird stuff. But the most recent weird thing I bought.
Oh boy.
Okay, is this.
What is that? Is it a giant
hole punch? And It means that you can make ring binders, which are binders with little rings in them that you can pull out the pages in the middle when you change them.
Ah, so you bought something productive and useful for your career as opposed to several pounds of meat.
Look, yours is more useful for a living. I also bought a witch sun hat.
Oh, I love that hat. That's a good hat. That's a really good hat. Do you have that hat to show?
I don't have it handy.
Okay. I thought it was giant stapler. That's fine. Yeah, I slowed down my. Oh, and today I bought a matte black pumpkin Dutch oven, like a cast iron pot.
Oh, those are so good.
I don't know what possessed me. It showed up like on like my Instagram or something, and I should not be trusted. Somebody should just not let me scroll. I bought some really foolish things because of Instagram. I should have a section on my Instagram where I review all the products.
Good, because then they'll just send them to you instead of trapping you with them.
The dream. The dream.
So one of the great tragedies of book signings that we have the first week the book is out is that most of the audience hasn't read the book. We have no idea how it will be received in the world.
Right.
And so I think that one of the really interesting things about having a paperback, conversation a year later is that, you now have, gone on to see that it was a embraced and acclaimed bestseller. But what I'm really curious about is, are there parts of the book you thought people would focus on or notice or talk about, or that it would be too weird that people never mention to you?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I mean, I can say that some of the early focus surprised me in its sort of pearl clutching. There was this sort of discourse around the book that was very like, it's so dark, it's all shock value, and I was really pissed off about that, honestly. Like, it really got to me because I had poured so much like heart and self into this book, which I think most of us do with all of our books. I mean, for me, the greatest joy has been watching people take the map and go to New Haven. Like, that was my secret. Like, I was like, that's like, felt hubristic to be like, oh, maybe people will go to New Haven because of this book. So even like when people post pictures and are like, we made a detour through New Haven and we found this, because every single thing on that map is there. Like, you can go and you can see El Baston and you can see all of the tombs and you can see where Alex lives. I put her in my dorm room from my freshman year. Actually, I put her in a much better dorm room because my dorm room was literally in the basement, and flooded my freshman year too. But you can see all of those things. The only place you can't see is Darlington's house, Black Elm. But that was a surprise, and also just like this tremendous joy. Like, I love New Haven, and in a way that I didn't love New Haven before I wrote this book. And it's such a strange, spooky, wonderful city, and it has like a really diverse, rich culture there. So, and to be frank, its relationship with the university is a fraught one. So anything that brings like business and people there makes me really happy.
So, okay. There's a lot about the dead and ghosts in Ninth House, which is why I am puzzled by people are like, it's so spooky. And you're like, yes, concerns the dead and ghosts.
And ghosts.
Does your family have a ghost story? And has anyone told you a good ghost story on tour for the book? Either or.
The greatest ghost story ever told to me was, I believe, Kelly Link told me the greatest ghost story, which was the most chilling ghost story.
She's a good collector of ghost stories.
Yeah. My family, okay, I'm going to make a bold statement here. Jews, my people, have been thrown out of so many places and have so much sort of hereditary trauma that I think ghosts have a slightly different meaning for us. And, you know, I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in a family that was incredibly fractured. You know, like my biological father's side of the family, I don't know at all. And my mother's side of the family, you know, was an immigrant story, you know, and had broken up, and somewhere on the East Coast, somewhere on the West Coast, a lot of estrangements and arguments. And so there was not a lot of history. Our family is sort of without lore. And the lore we do have is a little trashy. You know, apparently my great-grandfathers were twins and they hated each other. And so one got a really bad haircut, so he'd never be mistaken for the other brother, you know. I had an Uncle Iski who apparently used to pee off the back porch. Like, this is not like rich Gothic tales, you know.
But they would make great ghosts.
Uncle Iski would make great ghosts. They would all make great ghosts, actually. I do feel that I come from a family of grudges, so it's sort of like we are people who just hold on to our shit for a long time, and so I feel like very experienced haunters would be within my family tree.
You would lap other families. You'd be like, we started from behind, but now
pretty much.
So, what is the most haunted place you've ever been?
Well, Holly, I have this theory, and you will have to tell me if it's true or false.
Okay.
For you are more goth than I, but I have a theory that ghosts don't appear to goths because we are trying too hard. Like, we're pathetic. We're just like, please talk to me, please. I will tell you that the New Haven Green is built over a cemetery. It was the original graveyard. It was originally the center of town, where the town meeting house was, the church was. It was the center of culture. And when they moved the cemetery, they moved some of the graves, but there's thousands of bodies under that green. And for me, the kind of discord between this sunny place with food trucks around it and people having their lunch, and the fact that, you know, there's a story in Ninth House about a skeleton washing up in the roots of a tree, and it is 100% true. So, you know, I would say that is probably the most haunted place I've been.
That's terrifying.
It's spectacular.
So, I know lots of people have asked about sort of, you know, the difference or the bridge between YA and adult. But what I'm curious about is actually what it's like to be somebody who has created a large universe with tons of passionate fans. You know, you have all of your Grisha fans, right, who are, you know, super excited about Lives of Saints, waiting for Rule of Wolves. Like, is there pressure to write something? Like, did you feel pressure to, now that you've written something in another universe, do you have these new fans who are pushing at you? Like, do you feel like now you are a divided person? You know?
I mean, I would love to hear what you have to say about this too, because you sort of, you wrote YA, then you wrote this highly successful middle grade series, and then more YA, and then like you have more worlds. You wrote 30 damn books. So, you know, there's that. I'd be curious to know how you have felt that push and pull.
You know, I did it all fast. So I never had that. Well, I never had that large body of work in one world that you have, and then now, you know, you've moved to now having a second body of work. But I definitely felt like it was like I was always late. Like nobody was like, "Where's my book?" And I was like, "I just wrote a book," and they're like, "But not for me."
But not for me. That is 100% how I feel. I feel terrible for all the people who came to my work through Ninth House, because I feel like I've been feeding the Grisha world for a long time, because in YA, you know, you don't get to take a break. You don't get to take 3 years between books or 2 years between books. Like, there's a real, like, you must be producing. And I also didn't anticipate the amount of time that the show would take, like in terms of just like the sheer number of like emails I get now. And I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for any involvement I have in it, but it's also like, it takes up creative space and time. I feel like, honestly, recently Ninth House has gotten short shrift, like those readers, because I've done all these Grishaverse events for Lives of Saints. People will be like, yeah, where's Darlington? And I'm like, I promise.
I need help.
To be concrete about it, because I know some people have asked, you probably will not get the second Ninth House book until 2022, which I don't feel good about, but I also...
Somebody knew it. Somebody had already put it in the chat.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you, person. Fine. Yes, I wish I were faster. I'm just not a super fast writer, and there's just been a lot of stuff this year that took time and away, but I'm very excited to be back in the world. I've been researching it while I've been working on copy edits and so forth for Rule of Wolves. So yeah, but I definitely feel always late is exactly what it feels like.
I mean,
whoops.
The show, I've never had anything to do with a TV show, but going through the Spiderwick movie process, I cannot believe how much time was just gone. And even looking back, I'm not sure why, but it's like, I don't know what I was doing. Like phone call, like what could possibly have taken all the time? But it was like I lost a whole year of writing, and I don't know why.
I think that I think I was much more heavily involved with the show sort of earlier in the process. And as I felt like the time leaching away from writing, I started to feel like, if I'm not working, I genuinely don't feel good. And so I had to pull back, from being involved, but there's only so far you want to pull back because decisions get made without you. And then you're like, oh, and they're like, we sent an email. And I'm like, you sent like 42 emails. Just read all of them, you madman, so yeah, it's a balance that I've not achieved.
Well, and it's one more thing, right? It's one more thing. Like you said, oh, wait, these emails, it's one more thing to feel like you're late with.
I think for me, I may sort of be committing to permanently feeling that way just because there's a sense of, there's always something else that needs to be done or worked on. And in some ways I love that because I don't like the idea of being without projects. Like that's a terrifying feeling. But I think there's also like the desire to give as much as I can to each project. Like I think that we've all been in the position of coming up on a deadline and feeling like you're not going to do justice to the book. And to me, there is no worse feeling. Like that happened to me with Crooked Kingdom, where I thought, you were with me when I was working on Crooked Kingdom. Yeah. And I think you remember like the 3 a.m. letter that made me cry. Yeah. And Sarah Reese Brennan for sitting with me and being like, pat, dry your tears, we will fix it, And the deadline was so tight that I was just terrified I was going to let people down, and that the book wasn't going to be what I knew it could be. Like that's just a horrible feeling. And I've tried to make sure that now that I'm a little further along in my career, that I ask for the time I need, and I think I have a better sense of how long it takes me to work and to get through a story that I just didn't before.
When I was renovating my bathroom, the contractors were saying that the last 10% is the thing that makes 90% of the difference in how it looks, because and as you were talking about it, I never put it together, but I think it's true in writing too, that it's that last push of time that if you don't have, you cannot do all of this really important work because you're building so much structure before then.
Yes, I think that there's a reason that we develop the processes we do. And I think it's something that I really try to say to younger writers or new authors, that, understanding your own process is sort of this gift that you don't get until you've been through it a few times. And then it becomes this kind of safety net. But yeah, and I think, the longer the book, the more time it takes to edit, the more chances there are for things to slip through the cracks. I read all of my books out loud, and I think there's always a desire to push a little further and make it a little better. And so much of the work of writing happens in revision. So I don't know, like I always find that, like that we vacillate between megalomania, like this feeling of being, I am a genius, like this is brilliant. And then this terrible, just destroying self-doubt this sort of abject lying in a ditch humility where you're like, I'm nothing and no one, I'll never write again.
Awesome. It's all accurate.
And the job of the writer is actually, because both of those states are useful. Like the genius state is very useful for drafting, and the humility state is what you need for revision. And then at some point, hopefully, you come together in some sort of balance.
Well, since you have brought up process,
you
could talk a little bit about your process. And I always, because I don't think I knew this, but I was talking to Joe, your agent, and also my agent, said that you had the idea for Ninth House for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was curious, not just about your process when you're like sitting down to write something, but your process of evolving a project and how many projects you have sitting on the back burner, and like when do they come to the front?
Yeah, I feel like you never know. It's sort of this weird thing where there's this noisy choir in the background, and then every so often somebody steps forward and is like, now it's my turn to solo, Ninth House was the first idea I pitched to Jo when I signed with her, when she said, do you have any other things you want to work on? And we knew it didn't belong in YA, but we didn't know where it did belong. And it's sort of every time I would come to the end of a deadline or another book, we would talk about it again and try to, figure it out. And in some ways, I think some of the books that came before, The Secret History and A Discovery of Witches and The Magicians, they sort of built this little niche of magical academia books, and or I guess that Secret History isn't magical, but there's certainly a sense of unreality there. Right. And it's almost as if I was waiting for the market to come into being, and then all of us, and also I had to put out enough books and develop my work and sort of get to a point where somebody would let me do this, because to be frank, it's not a book for everybody. It's not a very mainstream idea. It's a weird, dark, full of weird jokes, full of bonkers magic book. And we knew it, having an editor who's like, I know this won't be for everyone, but we're going to market this book as if it's for everyone, was kind of just a tremendous gift that I don't think anybody would have given me at the beginning of my career. You know what I mean?
I do. I also think, though, that it's funny what we think is commercial and what we don't, because, sometimes we know, but I think a lot of times, we don't know, because it turns out, well, many people love Ninth House.
I think you once told me this. We were talking about Interview with a Vampire. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about how, even though it is a very famous book, everybody who reads it feels like they're discovering it, like it's a secret, And I realized that that's sort of my fantasy, is to have a book that whoever's reading it is like, does anybody know about this book?
What's in this?
What is this? I realized that is actually my dream response from a reader, is somebody to just be like, I don't know if you've heard of this, but this is the shit I didn't know I was looking for, So
and the specific, right? And the specific is the universal. And man, when I think about Interview with the Vampire, that's some specific business.
And I remember reading that book because my friend Damien asked me for, I guess it was the first 2 paperbacks for her birthday. So I went and got them for her, bought them at my local independent bookstore. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to see her for a few days. I'll just read them. And I was like, these are amazing. No wonder she wanted these books. But I also felt like it was a secret. I'd been let in on this secret world, and it gave me that. One of my favorite feelings from a book is not knowing quite where the real and the imagined leave off. So when there are real places, when you have the sense that it could have happened, when you're not quite sure what is historical fact and what is invented lore, that is for me very pleasurable.
I can see how Ninth House follows.
That is definitely an itch I was scratching with Ninth House, and will continue to scratch.
So, okay, we're getting close to Q&A time, but I have 2 questions. One is that even the biggest homebodies, like myself, have been fantasizing about travel. And we've been on a bunch of writing retreats together. I know that you have been on many writing retreats without me.
They are pale shadows of the retreats in which Holly Black is present. And I spend a week just standing, looking out at a rocky moor and crying. Where is Holly Black?
So, as you should. But what I thought it would be really interesting for people who are probably also fantasizing about traveling to hear about is what is the value of going somewhere to write? Because I know when I was a young writer, I was like, why do they keep doing that? Like, what's the point?
I didn't get it either. I mean, I knew I wanted to do it because it seemed really cool, but I didn't get it either. And I remember my very first writing retreat, it was with, I arrived and the only two people in the house were Cassie and Sarah Reese Brennan.
Really?
And what?
Never mind. Go ahead.
What? Okay.
Go ahead.
And I didn't know them. I had met them once briefly. I was completely intimidated and terrified. And we were in this house. I don't know if you remember this house. Like,
I remember that house.
Everything echoed in this house. Like, it was one of those like very like minimalist, like a single orchid in a vase and like buzz.
But a little bit of a cult too. It had a cult-like vibe.
Yes. It was an old like school or monastery that had been converted into a house. And so every damn sound I made, I was like, sorry. Like I would get up in the morning. I didn't know like where anything was. But Cassie was on deadline and I was like, well, she's working. I guess I'll be working too. And it was one of the most productive weeks in my life. I actually drafted 6 of Crows in that week. Like I did the 0 draft on that. And what's that?
In a week?
Well, it was a 30,000 word draft, but it was the fastest I've ever written. Like it wasn't the final draft of 6 of Crows is 130,000 words.
You wrote 30,000 words in a week?
I did. And never again. Look, I had nothing to do. I had nobody to talk to. Everybody was working. So I was like, they never rest. I too will work. Oh, is it time to go in the pool? Oh, okay. Like I honestly, I could not have been. Oh, and then I went for a hike and found a field that was just entirely full of spiders. And I was like, well, I will not be leaving the house again because clearly there are just spiders here. But
the thing I yelled at the beginning wasn't that when there was a bat loose?
Yes, the first night I arrived in the house, a bat got into the house, and the way I found that out was I heard screaming in the hallway, and Sarah was running naked down the hall, fleeing the bat. And I was like, this is gonna be a weird time. I like these people. But to speak to the point, look, writing retreats are this tremendous privilege, right? To get to leave your home and go to some beautiful place and look at a different view. And I think there's sort of 2 things at work. One is I think that travel actually really not only inspires in terms of, oh, look, this is a beautiful thing, or this is an interesting piece of history, but also your brain is being forced into a different mode. You're in an unfamiliar territory. Sometimes you're speaking a different language, and your brain becomes much more active because of that. And it's one of the reasons they say that when you stay in a hotel, for the first night, you usually don't sleep well because your body is on high alert. So I think that there's a good side to that, which is that you're simply more awake to the world in a different way. And I think that really fosters creative thought. The other part of it is the social aspect. There's a very powerful peer pressure element of, hey, everybody's working, I should work too. But there's also something so great about, being able to sort of say, damn it, I don't know how to do this, or how to fix this. And there's somebody there who is either struggling in the same way or can help you or has an idea. And it's always easier to fix somebody else's book, than that.
Means you don't have to be working on your book for that period of time.
You're working, I'm helping this other person. I couldn't possibly be working. And I've been lucky to meet people like you who are, for those of you who don't know, Holly's not only a genius writer, but also like a a master of breaking apart plot and helping to figure out diagnosing what is wrong with the book.
It's funny that Leigh should say that, because she is a master of breaking apart plot and diagnosing. And in fact, during that Italian trip, we were like, we were trying to help Robin Wasserman with her book, and we
had very different ideas about how this was supposed to be.
And it was the moment I knew that I loved Leigh. As we fought over Robin Wasserman.
I, of course, was like, Holly hates me. I got too strident. I'm not a woman who's very good at moderating her tone. So, but I mean, you've been a huge help to me, and I look. I think when you love story, like I love talking story and trying to figure out what's not quite working, because you're also talking about what is working, and like the juice of the story and like what's hooking you in, and like, oh, how can we bring more of that out? So I think that part of the process becomes less terrifying. Writing is a very lonely thing and a very daunting thing. And to sit down with somebody, to sit down with you and say, this is where I know I want the book to end, but I don't quite know how to get there. And then to just start bashing on it, is a great, it doesn't feel like it in the moment. In the moment, you just feel terrified. But then it's this tremendous gift to get to be with other writers.
You're carrying so much when you're writing a book that isn't quite there, and you're not sure. And so, to be able to put it down for a while and let other people sort through your sack. About,
There's also the simple encouragement of it. I remember when my process for writing Ninth House was somewhat different, because I was writing it in between other deadlines, and so I had to keep sort of reading and rereading, which when you get to the point where there's 70,000 words in a book, it takes a lot of time. And I was on retreat, and I was rooming with Kelly, and Kelly read the book. And
you're in your ice cold room.
I love an ice cold room. I like to sleep in a cold room. It's delicious. Like a nice cold room. But this was actually after that. But it was also ice cold. And Kelly read it, and she loved it and was excited about it, and it renewed that in me, because I had reached a point where I thought, I'm failing this idea, and I think that's, I tell people all the time, when you're feeling like you're failing, it just means you're trying to do something you haven't done before. But I couldn't take my own advice in that moment and say, this is just growing pains. So I needed somebody to come in and be like, no, let's keep doing this. Let's do this. Let's get to the next part. It was helpful.
All right, last question.
Okay.
For your witchy self, what are you going to do for Halloween?
Oh, Holly, what are you doing for Halloween? You have a kiddo, so.
We're going to do a scavenger hunt.
Where is there?
We're going to do an evil scavenger hunt, and I have some lollipops with ants in them that he won't like.
I don't actually know. We've had a lot of, I've sort of vague tweeted about this, but there's sort of some intense health stuff happening in my family, and it's been a tough and dark season. So I don't know what we'll do, but Halloween is unsurprisingly my favorite day of the year. So I will be celebrating Cemetery Boys. We'll be doing a Halloween themed book club with Aiden Thomas, which I'm looking forward to immensely. And the day of, we'll see. I mean, possibly just, put on what I usually wear and walk outside and shriek at my neighbors. The usual.
Are you good at putting on costumes? I don't wear costumes on. Almost never wear costumes on Halloween. I always because I always want to wear some weird stuff that I have. So I'm always putting together some karmic from stuff I have.
No, but that's what I like. I like to take something I haven't had a chance to wear and build a look around it.
Yep.
That's how I've always sort of done my thing. Or sometimes an idea will come to me. My favorite Halloween costume of all time was Dead Surfer. It was when I was living in New York. So it was representing West Coast. And I had board shorts and a tank top, and I put a huge shark bite. I paled did drowning makeup, and I stuck barnacles to me, and I loved this. I had a broken surfboard with me, and it was that was my favorite. And I Bride of Frankenstein too, which I actually want to recreate at some point.
I don't think it's as good as yours, but I did one and I loved
Love it. We could do all brides of Frankenstein. It could be a theme. Just all brides.
Okay. I think we should move on to Q&A because we have a lot of questions. I'm sorry, y'all. There's like 51 questions, so obviously we won't be able to go through all of them. But the most on-demand question is from Kimberly. Is there any news about the second book of the Ninth House you can tell us, or the show?
I can tell you that we just brought some producing partners on for the show that I'm super excited about. I've written a draft of the pilot, but it will definitely be rewritten. I was told it was too funny because I love jokes. Not enough murder, too many jokes.
So take that, people who thought it was dark.
I think the book is hilarious, but that's me. And as for the book, as I said, 2022, I'm going to work to get it done as fast as I can, but also I want to make sure that it's what I want it to be. The plot is basically in place. It's pretty weird. So, you know how weird book 1 was? Expect more weirdness in book 2. And there will be no COVID in this book because I'm not interested in writing a college campus that's besieged by plague, unless it's monsters.
Okay, so speaking of college campuses, this question comes from DJ. Are there any surprising or particularly interesting facts about Yale or the societies that you wanted to include in Ninth House but couldn't?
Not really. Anything that didn't make it into book 1 will probably make it into book 2. The weirdest thing was having to talk to an attorney repeatedly about the book, because when we sold the book, I made it clear that it had to be set at Yale and the societies had to have the names that they have at Yale. And I didn't want it to be like, some like, oh, you can tell it's Yale, but it's not called, like, I didn't feel the story would work otherwise if that tension between the real and the imagined wasn't sort of front and center. But that also meant having some talks, and a lot of stuff that I thought might be an issue wasn't, because obviously like Skull and Bones isn't going to be like, we don't actually cut up, vagrants. Like they're not gonna, like that's not something that they're going to protest. Where we had to be really careful was with the fraternity stuff. Like, because that shit does happen and it happens on the regular. And, I had to make up a frat. I had used originally the Beta Avalanche as this party, and they were like, nope, cannot use that. And so, like the Omega Meltdown, that was one, like, that is not the kind of world building I like to do, like naming a fraternity party. But like all of that was a little stressful. And there were certain bits and pieces where we had to be very careful to make sure that I wasn't going to get sued. Also, we had to cut some of the Morrissey lyrics because he is mean and frightening and litigious. And we were like, we had to use as little of that song as we possibly could.
All right, the next question is from Rosie, and it's for both you, Leigh, and Holly. What's the weirdest rule of lore that has emerged from your world building?
I would love to know this from you. I have one from Holly's books that I love.
Oh, I was just thinking from just general lore, because my favorite thing is totally vampire folklore, where there's this thing that if you scatter seeds, some kind of specific seed, poppies.
Well, in X-Files it was sunflower seeds, but I think it can be any seeds or grain.
Right, the vampire has to stop and pick them up before it can keep on chasing you. It is like
likes a tidy street.
The thing is, it took me years. Like I was in the middle of Cold's Grown Cold Town tour, because I would talk about it sometimes on tour, to realize that's where the count came from. The Sesame Street count.
What?
I mean, it must have, right?
What?
It's like that. I mean, at least he's doing the thing.
Wow.
It has to.
That's deep. That's some deep lore right there. Yeah, so I actually was gonna say one from Holly's books that I love. It's not that weird, but when you did the the wedding and the fact that they can't lie, and so the vows are exchanged in private, There's no need for witnesses. And I was like, damn, that is some subtle, brilliant shit right there. Like, I love that so much. Absolutely love that. I mean, I don't know if it's weird, but I took real pleasure in sort of changing up some of the ideas of what ghosts like or are drawn to. And in the world of Ninth House, the idea that ghosts are drawn to human things and to pleasure. You know, they're drawn to salt and sticky and sweet and to passionate emotions, whether that's love or lust or anxiety. So they're always hovering around the library around finals time, you know, and just like sniffing the coffee. And you know, they're drawn so compulsively to these to what makes us human and what makes life, you know, tactile and pleasurable for humans. And that to me was, and the idea of how you ward against ghosts being with death, you know, that ghosts fear any sign of death. So the best thing you can do is scatter a little bone dust and speak the death words, you know.
I think that's one of the things.
Sorry, go right ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think one of the things that I think you do so well is that once you come up with a rule, like you have it, and like you push it into the world in the way it would really be. Like you come up with all of the like the small pieces of detail like that, like haunting the library during, you know, exams, like the details. And I think that's what makes the fantasy feel so real.
Oh, thank you. I hope so.
All right. I just saw a question, but all right. So this is from Heidi. With 2 queens of world building and lore here, what components do you think are foundational to building a fantasy world or the lore of a world?
I mean, I would be so hesitant to say that there's like a rule for sort of foundational texts, or I think, you know, the reader, when they enter a world that is not quite our world, are really looking for signposts. You know, they're looking to understand how does power function in this world, and it's not necessarily magical power. You know, it's how does power function in this world between people, between friends, between parents and kids, between a professor and a student, between the institution and the people who go there, between that institution and the town, between that town, and you know, they're looking for all the signs of how government functions and how power functions more widely. And then they're also looking for this sense of place. And I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about atmosphere. And I kind of feel like if those 2 things are in place for the reader, you can get away with a lot.
Great. I mean, I think the thing I've been thinking about a lot is how magic, when you're creating a magic system, you know, whether you are taking it from folklore or whether you are, you know, building it from the ground up, it has to be thematically consistent. It has to feel like it's in the same thematic world, and it has to be talking about something in some way thematically, whether, you know, like I think the idea of fairy is often about like corruption and beauty, you know, there and the corruption of desire and beauty. And I think, you know, when something doesn't fit in thematically, it sticks out. And I think people care way more about whether it feels thematically right than whether it's an internally consistent system, which is always a plus. Look, oh, it's a plus. But like, I think that sense of resonance. And I think that the second thing is it has to be story generative. Like you can come up with the coolest rule that seems awesome, but if it does not generate more story, it will not work.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to be thinking about that thematic element, because I think that's one of those things you stumble into, and when it's working, it's really driving the story for you. Yeah.
Okay, this question is a fun one. It's from Coco Ma. Given your expertise on makeup, could you tell us the secrets of how to wear dark lipstick, especially since it's fall and Halloween is 8 days away?
I mean,
you're as a professional.
I wasn't a very good makeup artist. That's the problem. I like to think I'm a much better writer than makeup artist. Look, you and I have actually talked about this on retreats like extensively, and have tried a variety. Look, the thing is, a liquid lip, I like to combine like a liquid lipstick, which, you know, we're all familiar with, usually, yeah. And they always have a little bit of alcohol in them. That is what is, that is drying that on your lips, and that's what adds the permanent to it. And that has been the case forever. Like, I used to do like some body painting, and and you learn very quickly that that alcohol is very drying, but it is also the thing that keeps you from, you know, leaving blue paint on the furniture. And then I like to pair that with something that has the same color, but that is moist, because then you can refresh without continually drying out your lips. That's the best advice I have. Holly?
You can also use the liner. Use a liner. Like if you have a black liner and it is safe for lips, then you can color in black on your lips.
Yep.
And then when you put the black lipstick over it, it's not going to move it as much because you don't have to push it to the edge of your lips.
Yeah, little layering goes a long way. But the fact is, like, I always end up with some missing right here. And my lips have been super dry the past few months, so I haven't been wearing super dark lipstick because my lips just won't tolerate it right now. Like, it just flakes. It's not cute.
Okay, this question is from Anne. What is your favorite book you've written? Which book was the easiest or hardest to write?
Holly?
Me?
You?
What's my, wait, what are, wait. All right,
I remember What?
What was the easiest book to write for me?
Yeah.
Probably Red Glove in the Curse Workers series, because I feel like one of the things that I change a lot of stuff when I write. Like, I'm constantly changing things. And one of the things that those books had, because they had a backbone that was a con, it forced a structure that I couldn't change.
Yeah, I feel that. By the way, if you guys have not read Curse Workers, it was actually the first thing I read by Holly, and it's one of my favorite trilogies. And if you liked Six of Crows, if you like cons and heists, it's spectacular. I think my easiest book was probably, I don't know. I was about to say Shadow and Bone, except it took me like how many years to get over my shit and write my first novel. So I can't even say that. I think that was the sort of most easy organic process because I wasn't up in my head in the same way that I am now. And I have to say, getting to write Ninth House was just this tremendous joy because I'd been waiting so long to write it, and I got to throw open all these doors of lore that I had wanted to explore. Oh my God, I kept rhyming. But I'll also, okay, so this is gonna be corny, but I wrote Rule of Wolves in quarantine, and I never sort of expected to have that feeling again of escaping into my own world. And I definitely did. And I felt very grateful to be back with those characters and in that environment, and to just be able to lose myself there for a while, and to also to have power in that world. You know, when we're writing, we're gods. We can do whatever we want. And in the world right now, I feel incredibly powerless and vulnerable and subject to the winds of fate and fortune. Whereas I am the winds of fate and fortune. So in the Grisha verse.
Did you resent the characters for being, like, in some cases, being less stressed than you?
Sorry, what?
Did you resent the characters for being less stressed than you were? I did.
I know how they were. I'm like, I know, like, I was like, they're so powerful. Like, I was like, I want powers. I want some damn powers. And I'm like, all these healers are out here. I'm like, come cure COVID. Freaking useless Grisha. Like, very frustrating.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. So let's see here. This is a question from Barbara. You two are great at writing morally gray characters with some questionable attitudes, but they are still well liked. How do you approach writing them?
I mean, look, here's a truth. Readers will forgive a competent character a lot. If they're good at what they do, they're good at being bad, They're good at being dangerous. I think that there's a sort of thing that draws us to a competent character. And I'll say too that I think that people are sometimes more forgiving of dudes. You know, you give a guy black hair and a sharp jawline, nobody really cares if he murdered 1,000 people. They're like, well, he's troubled. So I think that there's forgiveness that's built in for them. But I also don't worry too much about likability. You know, when I was writing Alex, I realized that there was a nobility in a lot of my female characters, and I wanted her to be a pure survivor. And I wanted to give her the ability to survive even in this world. And her journey is very much about her both embracing the things that will allow her to survive and rejecting this world that she thought she wanted to be a part of so desperately, and also becoming connected to other people in a way that strengthens her, because she's so rootless and so without connection at the start of the story. So, you know, I don't think it's that important. I don't worry about my characters being likable. I worry about them being real and having an agenda. That's kind of it.
So, when Cassie and I were teaching Clarion Writers Program. We actually gave a weird talk about this. So I cannot take credit for this entirely myself, but, you know, we were talking about how we forgive epic, terrible actions in a way that we do not forgive petty, terrible actions. And like, for instance, you know, you gave the example of like murdering a lot of people in real life. We would not necessarily want to be friends with a murderer, but in a book, you're like, eh. In real life,
there's perks to being friends with a murderer. They get shit done.
In real life, thieves, I mean, you know, but in a book, that person is the hero. They are automatically the hero.
Look, they're getting to transgress, right? Like, but sorry, go on. I want to hear the end of this.
Bad tipper. In real life, you might know one. In fiction, you will never forgive them. Nope. Never. There's nothing bad tipper.
You put that as a note at the start of Crooked Kingdom. That guy Redvenko does not leave a tip, and you're like, he's gonna die. And I'm like, he is gonna die.
He's gonna, like, we don't, because I think we read mass murder and we read stealing metaphorically. Yeah. It stands in for our fantasies of power, our fantasies of revenge, our fantasies of control, you know, but we know a bad tipper is just a bad tipper and they're a bad person.
I agree with that. And I think there's also I think there's a desire in us to transgress and to be powerful and to do these things. You know, there's a scene where Alex shows who she really is sort of for the first time when she basically smacks down Salome. And I would be lying if I didn't say it was cathartic to write that. You know, like that there's tremendous pleasure in that for me. And hell, when Alex, you know, Kaz cut out Uman's eye, I loved writing that scene. I was like, what comes next, Kaz? And I remember my editor being like, maybe too far. We want the audience to like him. And I was like, no, this scene is romance. I was like, this is romance. And my number one note when reading your books was always, make him meaner. I want Carden to be
You were instrumental in making Carden worse. I really don't think I could have done it as well. Like, I don't think I could have pushed him as far if it was not for you.
You're welcome, lovers of Carden. Or people were like, oh, that's why he's a dick.
But you're right. Like, you have to find that line, or it doesn't feel legitimate. There's no tension.
I love Jude and Carden so much, and I felt like Jude is talk about a survivor character. You know, that willingness to do what it takes to survive in a world that views you as expendable.
Talk about a mass horror character.
Views you as entertainment. You know, like that is. She needed a foil though, you know, and I was like, and a sweetie pie, you know. My Jude needed somebody who was worthy of her violence.
And it does come to me like it is the thing though that trips me up about pettiness, because I think we do really love a petty villain. Like we love a petty villain somehow. Like somehow there's something in there. It's not the same kind of pettiness as not tipping, but like people who are selfish and who are like, I don't know, like get really upset over little stuff or vain. Like we love that kind of pettiness. And I can't square it with my like elegant little piece of business there. But man, we love that.
I think that there's something effusive in the pettiness of good villains. There's a drama. There's a luxuriating in it. Somebody who doesn't tip is just an asshole who wants to keep their money for themselves. But, a truly petty villain who enjoys being, only I can do this. I think, and I feel like there's like, when I talk about villains, my gestures become much more like you. But like, I think that there's a way that they take pleasure in that. There's nothing grudging about it. And that is, I think, very enjoyable to write and very enjoyable to read.
I definitely thought about that when I was reading, well, I shouldn't say, but.
No, you can't say.
But yeah.
My light. Got too excited.
But it was great, Petty.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are at the last question, and I wanted to end on a fun note. So this is a question from Katie. Favorite food that you've written into your books? Also, what's your favorite kind of cake?
Favorite food. Okay, this is going to be really weird, but I don't know if it's my favorite, but I put a Jell-O mold, like a gelatin mold. It wasn't Jell-O, right? But there's in Siege and Storm, there's a Jell-O mold of a fawn, like a. And look, I love writing food, and this is why people like in my war books, like I hate war books because everybody's eating like salt cod and hardtack and just nobody's enjoying themselves, and they always end up at like some nobleman's house where it's like, let's have a delicious repast, and there will be tiny fruit trees in the beautiful centerpiece, Oh, and there was a party. There's the Winter Fete in Shadow and Bone. There are mermaids in the fountain who serve you oysters. So for me, it's all about like the presentation, the party foods.
So for me, remember when I asked you if there was something that you thought that people would like comment on or see that they never said anything about? Okay, for me, my favorite food that I've written is the snake in Queen of Nothing that no one has anything to say about ever. And I really expected something.
No. Afraid not.
What's my favorite thing, though?
All right, what's your favorite kind of cake? Are you a cake person?
I mean, I'm not against cake.
Right.
I prefer a pie.
Me too. I prefer a pie or a crumble. However, I like any kind of cake with cream. So like it can't just be like a chocolate cake. There has to be some vanilla involved, something to lighten it up. I love a fruit, like a strawberry or raspberry, little cream and vanilla cake. Yeah.
I like all the cinnamons, the cardamoms.
My niece just made horchata cupcakes. Delicious. Just delicious. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to come back on. Well, thank you, Holly. Thank you, Leigh. That was such a fun conversation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in, all 211 of you. It was a packed house. Again, if you would like a signed book plate, just click on the green Purchase Books button directly below the viewer screen. It will take you to our website. And when you are completing your purchase, just make sure you write signed copy or book plate in the comment section so that we know that you want a signed copy. Also, we are going to be doing more virtual events, and you can follow us on Crowdcast or on our website. We have a calendar so you can keep track of what's to come. And I think that about does it.
I want to say a huge thank you to Holly because she jumped in to do this.
Oh, yes.
And it was so nice for me to get to see your beautiful face and just hang out for an hour. So thank you for that.
Super fun. Anytime.
Yay.
All right. Well, stay safe, everyone, and have a good night. Right. Bye.
Bye, everybody.